This is the breakup theory, conversations about ending things and collective liberation. In this episode, Caroline and I respond to a letter from a listener who's trying to navigate a tricky relationship. It is a relationship with a lot of fuzziness, moving from romantic and sexual relationship to friends. There are also attempts at real conversation, though they aren't always clear, producing a difficult dynamic to understand and find bearings in. They know they need to end it, or at least take space from it, but they're also tied into the queer anarchist community in a small town that centers around this person's house. As they say, they're trying to put the ghost back in its grave, because all of their attempts at clarity and space get lost in confusing communication and signals. This letter really brings up dynamics that are probably familiar to you all. The relationship where one person chases and the other person distances, then flips. The feeling that the end of the relationship will damage your relationships with other people, and of course, deep personal connection and history that's hard to let go of, even if it is clearly part of the past. The listener seems to know what they want. They work it out in the letter pretty clearly, but all of these ties and the ghosts keep them bound. Caroline and I try to discuss the dynamics from many angles, perhaps not coming to a simple solution, but hopefully giving a helpful perspective for all of our listeners who may be caught in similar situations. I do want to note that when I was listening back to the conversation, there are points where I'm not sure I gave enough space to relationality. In other words, I give credence to many of those relationship truisms about centering yourself in a breakup, but feeling yourself can't really be done without others. You can choose whom to share yourself with, but we're made up of all these relationships and depend on them to see and understand ourselves. If you want to support my work, head on over to cawshinythings.com, cawshinythings.com, the home for a collective project of worker writers, including myself, Carla Joy Brigman, Danny Burleson, and Vicky Osterwell. You can subscribe for free to get our newsletter, advice column, podcast, and zine sticker library. With a paid membership, you get full access to all of our articles and essays, along with workshops, book clubs, and movie nights, and our thriving Discord community. There are no tiers with a paid subscription. Check it out and sign up if you'd like. The Breakup Theory is a member of the Channel Zero network of anarchist podcasts, a great resource for finding out all the anarchist news, events, analysis, advice, stories, and more. Check it all out at channelzeronetwork.com. And now for our conversation. Back again, me and Caroline here to discuss a difficult situation that has been sent in to us. So we'll get right into it. I'm going to read the letter, and then Caroline's going to give a little bit of backstory that the writer shared with us. So this is what they sent. I'm experiencing a rupture in my relationship with a really close friend, and I'm considering ending my friendship with them. This person means a lot to me, and I have so much love and care for them. I wouldn't be at the place in my life I am now without them, and I feel immense and almost crippling sadness at the thought that I might not be able to be friends with them anymore. When they ask to talk or visit to find a way forward between us, I shrivel up and hide inside, because I don't know what there is to say or try that we haven't already done. I hadn't told my friend that I'm considering breaking up with them. However, last time we met up to talk and try and find a path forward for us, they said it felt like our friendship might be ending, and that they don't want that to happen. I told them that I've been having similar thoughts and that I love them very much.
Thanks, Shuli. Okay, so I'm going to summarize some context and background that this person sent in and do my best to keep it non-identifying, but hitting some important themes and context. So the writer has known this person for almost 10 years. They live in a pretty remote community, very, very small, few anarchists and even less queer anarchists. So their circle of who they feel connected to is pretty small in their community. The person that they're writing about, their friend, has been a support to them throughout coming out as non-binary, HRT. They've done a lot of mutual aid support with one another. Sounds like a lot of activism and movement work together. But the thing that really stood out to me reading the context is that when they first became friends, they were friends with benefits. And without kind of being super, the summarization is they we're kind of in this pattern for a long time around whether or not the sex between them felt joyous and then it felt weird, going through rough patches, not feeling like they were meeting their each other's emotional needs, several pretty significant fights. So I'm gonna just hit on a couple of things that this person said in the context that I thought were really important. They feel that they said, I don't want to read this. The ghosts have arisen that won't go away. These ghosts are like a constant wailing in my mind, telling me that if I let this person back in my life and start spending time with them one on one again, I'm going to get hurt again. They've told me many times that they love me and care for me and they want to work this out. They said, I need the past between us to die in order to move forward, but I don't know how to kill it. I don't know what to do to put those ghosts back in their graves. I don't want to lose a friend, but I also recognize that if I remain close to this person, I might not find the relationships that nourish me more fully. We both want to fix this, but the thing that feels least painful for me right now is no contact. Shuli, do you feel like that's a pretty good summary of the context and background that this person provided?
I would just add that it seems like the writer has had some strong feelings come up for this person and tried to
Oh,
address
yeah,
them.
thank you.
And the other person has been very kind of back and forth around it, either like saying they don't want this, but then also making kind of overtures that seem romantic, which is like
Mhm.
very confusing. It seems to me like anytime the person who wrote us is being clear and open about their feelings, then the person kind of withdraws. But
Yeah.
then if the writer withdraws, they come back.
They come back, right? And maybe perhaps with confusing information for the
Yeah,
writer.
there's some really confusing stuff that they talk about in terms of like the one thing that really stuck out to me around Valentine's Day, the person that they're having this kind of trouble with had written them a letter and then said it wasn't romantic. And so that's like
Yeah.
that's so confusing to
Yeah, that
have.
would confuse me too, that it was this anonymous, the person wrote that it was an anonymous love letter. And
The
then the
per
friend said, this is not romantic. This is not meant to be a romantic gesture.
Right. And the person who wrote was like took this kind of opportunity to be explicit about their feelings and then they were like, no, I don't have these feelings. We're not close. And then they said, well, I was hitting on you, but that wasn't because I wanted to do anything. So
Right, because I had feelings about you or feelings for you. Yeah, as we're talking, a lot of the themes that are coming up for me in this are reciprocity, varying definitions of what it means to have intimacy in romance. And while you and I can talk about that from a theoretical standpoint, and I think we probably will, the message that I'm getting from the person who wrote the letter is that this has been painful for them. This has not been, this has not felt good. This confusion has not felt good. And they, in fact, are being really clear within themselves and with this person that things aren't feeling good. And I don't want to go so far as to say it sounds like the writer has made up their mind, but the fact that the writer has said to their friend that they are thinking that this might be the end really indicates to me that this person is ready in the way that we can never be truly ready for pain and for actively choosing to end something that has once nourished us. But they themselves are saying they're ready to create a little more opportunity and space and time for more nourishing relationships.
I mean, one thing that's holding them back, they say, is that they're angry at themselves for not making that jump, which is another like feeling that I totally understand. Because if you feel like a relationship is harming you, but you still have love for this person, it's really hard to kind of decisively say, I need to cut this off for my own feelings.
Yeah.
And then, like, the other thing is just like that this person lives in a house that's like the hub for all the anarchist
Yeah.
activity. So when if the writer cuts off the relationship, then they also feel like they're cutting themselves out of these spaces that are important to them with other people.
Right. If we as queers like can be really permissive and loving with one another enough to have like varying degrees of definitions of what intimacy can be and what it looks like, can we also offer ourselves that in terms of a breakup? Right. So I'm curious about, is it possible for this person to say, I need to go no contact with you. This is what this might look like within the context of community overlap. Like no contact could mean we don't communicate one on one. or we block each other's numbers, or when we are in shared spaces, we agree to not interact at all. But it doesn't necessarily, to me, exclude the possibility that you might have shared space. Like you might be going to the same potluck, and how might it look to decide whether or not you go, or you sit that one out?
In that situation, I can totally understand why that would be really hard because this writer talks about different times that they've been in the same place as this person and the kind of lack of clarity, or even just like if there is like a kind of silence between them, is also hurts them.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, when I was listening to you, I was thinking about how, okay, so first, if you're like, I'm gonna take space, no contact, you can set that for a certain amount of time, not be like, this is indefinite forever, whatever. And there is a possibility that you could like work out who's gonna be in what space if you don't want to share space. I mean, I don't know if this other person is gonna be really open to that, but that could be a thing to think about.
I don't mean to sound naive when I say, like, is there a way to expand our flexibility and fluidity to this situation? I don't know much other than what was written in the context, right? Like, my sense is that outside of kind of emotionally, my sense, what I am getting from what I'm reading into is outside of emotionally activating conversations, these two people are communicating, right? Just the fact that they communicated to one another that they're both having similar feelings is pretty significant to me. And so it makes me curious about, like, if they did decide to go no contact, how would they bring that to that person? And would there be opportunity, like you said, to discuss, you know, how do we want to navigate, like, who's going to be at book club, right? Like, my hope is that they could have that conversation together, and that the writer still gets to decide what their boundaries are. It's heartbreaking and hard that they're feeling isolated. And sometimes I don't know if there's like a way to be out of that consequence when we do have to make decisions to protect ourselves.
So one way that I could possibly understand this, and I don't know if this is true, because you're saying, they've communicated, but it seems to me that the communication isn't equal two-way. And I think there's a power imbalance in this
Mm-hmm.
situation where, the person who wrote us is very vulnerable, and the person who they're having these feelings for and wanting to cut off holds power in the
Yeah,
situation
I
that
agree.
the person who writes it doesn't, and they kind of invoke this power whenever the writer shows vulnerability.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of the kind of chasing thing where, like, if the writer is overt and explicit, then they withdraw, and then if the writer tries to protect themselves, then this person comes to them. And I think that is also a kind of power dynamic. I don't know that it's not necessarily intentional, right? Like people do these things in their patterns, and like even for the writer, it could be a pattern that they fall into, like that this is something that like kind of relates to the way that they engage with romantic situations, or even like that this kind of pattern stokes the feelings for them.
Yeah.
But I would consider this from this power relationship that, like, I don't know in this context, in this situation, if the other person is able to see things in this way in
Hmm.
order to kind of move forward in a way that's like respectful of the writer. I don't think that person has that insight. I think that they might just understand this relationship as kind of simple. They seem to be kind of like up in their own space without like consideration of other people, because the way that they're treating this person is just not right. It's like it's really, I don't know, it's like kind of exploiting this person's kindness and vulnerability and their like desire.
Yeah,
That's
there's
just like when it's convenient for the other person, they'll kind of take advantage of it. And but yeah, again, I don't know that this is like a conscious attempt to like harm this person. I think a lot of this stuff happens without us thinking about it. And it's also just like a kind of romantic trope in lots of stories too.
Mhm.
I mean, I totally understand this. The first kind of love that I had was almost exactly the same. And I was like, maybe I took on that role for the rest of my life where I'm going to be the person who's like constantly hurt by my openness to someone who like will come and withdraw with like no sort of pattern that makes any sense. So yeah, I guess I'm a little less optimistic that there's a way, unless this other person is doing some kind of work or
Mhm.
having some kind of insight or like reflection on what's happening, that they're going to be able to show up at the same level that the writer is. Also, I think I kind of felt when I read this letter that the writer had like told themselves in the letter what they need to do, like they worked it
Yeah,
out.
I agree. And when I say that they're communicating, like they had this conversation where the friend said they feel like the friendship is ending. Like there is at least some shared reality here. I don't think that there's necessarily emotional reciprocity or the kind of reciprocity that could, it's not sustainable for the writer. The writer knows
Yeah.
that. The writer is very clear. This is not working. This doesn't feel good. I would encourage the writer to, and I'm not saying this out of pocket. This is something I really really struggle with, but a deeper reflection on what is the difference between love and activation.
Mm,
Is this love? Do you love this person? Do you feel loved by this person? Or are you feeling enormously activated by this person? And are you feeling compelled toward this person in a kind of repetition compulsion, like trauma mastery way to try to figure out, like, is there a way to put this to rest? It might not be that a friendship with this person is not going to be the thing that puts the ghost back in their graves.
no.
Got to do something new and different. And that sucks and it's hard. And I've really been in that experience over the last several years of my life in many different relationships. This is the first time in my adult life that I actually have gone no contact with several people. And it was so hard. It
Mm.
was so hard. I felt like a part of my identity was collapsing. And the part of my identity was like, let's see how it goes. Like there's always nuance, there's always more context. And yeah, it I agree with you, Shuli. I'm really glad that you brought up the potential for there being a unconscious or subconscious power dynamic at play here.
And I kind of feel like you shouldn't be in a relationship where you feel like someone else holds all this power over your emotional state. Even, I mean, I think that there's a desire that might fuel that, like you like it or something, like you were saying, kind of activating things. The other thing is that there's like this other thing I was thinking about is, first of all, there's a kind of standard within certain kinds of queer relationships for endless processing. And
Mm,
so some of the communication between them might be that, right?
yeah,
Like we're always going to deal with a problem. And even if they're not explicitly talking about it that way, here I'm thinking of this problem for the writer, at least, a version of breaking up as an endless processing where we talk about breaking up as an attempt to kind of free yourself from obligations that aren't really helpful to you, feeling like this idea that relationships are things that you need to kind of cultivate forever, but maybe they have time and rhythms that can kind of free both of the people from that. But there's also a version of breakup where you're in a relationship where the relationship sort of revolves around like, should we break up? Should we not break up? Should we break up? Should we not?
yeah,
Where it feels like you're kind of in this relationship with breaking up, but it never fully happens.
right.
And so that would be another thing to consider. Like, is this kind of a processing of breaking up that actually isn't allowing this kind of release that I think this person needs some release from the situation because it sounds so painful.
I do too. One of the things that might be keeping them in that loop is the context of this being such a small community and the experience of being so seen and supported in their experiences in a way that they weren't getting from anyone else but this person.
Right. I mean, that's a huge part too, right? Like they said they grew up in a kind of Christian cult, and this other person was the first person that they felt seen by in their queerness, and within that context, they were able to transition. That's really hard to let go of when someone has played that role in your life, right? And it's such a powerful role to have in someone's life that would make you want to cling to this relationship. But there's another thing that you can think about is like, sure, this person was there for the beginning of something for you,
Yes.
but at some point you can take on that power yourself, right? This person was maybe supportive for the writer to transition, but now the writer is in their body and like kind of blooming in their own way, and they don't necessarily need this person to be there. to be their like bedrock of, living out their identity the way they want to.
Yeah, the writer wasn't made by this person.
Right. Well, there can also be a way that this person was super supportive of the writer's transition, and then their support has become this kind of conditional thing. And so that undermines the writer's kind of sense of themselves, right? The power that they might have felt within like discovering their own embodiment the way they want is now being undermined by someone who's constantly forcing them to question themselves.
Right. Or, yeah, what a great point. Yeah, that's a really, I just want to sit with that for a second, actually. I think that's such a good way of putting it that this person may have felt really authentic, enormous support. And now there's something that's limiting. There's like something that's kind of suffocating further growth. And that doesn't mean that at one point that wasn't the exact thing that they needed. But that changes. And, I don't want to get too personal, but one of the breakups I've had in the past year or so was the context felt similar to me that I really felt that we grew up together. And when I am grieving that, I'm really grateful for what we had. Like we had each other in this time and place and context, and we kind of reached a point of our own growth pathways, and it deviated past the point of mutual health. Yeah, and this person is really naming like that this doesn't feel reciprocal to them.
Right. I mean, that's one of the harder things to do. Like, if you're talking about like one of your oldest friends, I mean, I've had this experience where I was like very clear to myself, like, I cannot have a relationship with these people anymore. But then they like try to kind of compel you into it because of this past, the shared past, like you can't let go of this. Like like your feelings aren't really real because we have such a shared history. And this person who wrote to us in a way like sort of entered their life, like removing themselves from a really suffocating place with this cult, Christian cult. So it's like sort of this beginning history that feels so important. And I don't know to what extent the person that they have these feelings for kind of is aware or knows how important they are. Like maybe the writer has talked about this or even like is a refrain for them. Like I feel like you really helped me. And that is another place where you can be giving power to someone, right? Because you're saying in a way that you were responsible for me being able to do this. And that person can then feel like they can tell you that you need them to be able to be who you are. And whether or not that's conscious, I don't know. And like, these ties feel really hard to cut off, but again, it might be the thing you need in order to grow further, right? Because this person was only capable of helping you this far. And the other thing that I was thinking about kind of in relation to like feeling like you belong among queer people and that you yourself are like queer or trans enough to be part of that, like they may feel because the person like kind of lives in this house where like it's the social hub and that's where like all the queer anarchists are, that they're physically on the outside by not living there, and they may feel like their entrance into this community is tied up totally with this person, and that may really also feel like an interior kind of exclusion, right? That they not that simply that they're physically excluded, but that they may not be themselves if they don't have this relationship. I think that's really common for like queer and trans people too.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's the community, and if you're not in the community, then who are you? Like,
You don't get to be who you are, or you don't get to be a part of that shared identity.
right. And like that's not true.
Hmm.
And I wonder to what extent also this person could cultivate relationships with the other people that make them feel seen and supported, because like you can't have a like the important thing about a kind of queer trans community is like forming a care and support network.
Yeah.
It's not about like in or out. And so, would it be possible to find some kinds of support and fulfillment in relationships with these other people that would then give them a kind of place to go that's safe enough to remove this other person from at least the kind of closeness that they have, that the kind of power that this person has on them. I really think I mean, it's, it's whatever. It's like a kind of truism. Like you break up, like give space, like give more attention to your friends. But I think it's true that to be able to really feel empowered to break up, you want to have some other kind of form of support wherever you can find it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because depending on the breakup, and it sounds like this could be one of those, it really feels like you're shattering a mirror.
Hmm.
I mean, it's just such a fragmenting experience and potentially could feel, like you said, about losing yourself or having some part of yourself destroyed. Adding into that the fact that this person knows that they're the one who wants to kill it. They
Yeah.
use that language. I hope that this community has a foundation of care and support rather than, an in and out. Yeah, I hope.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other situation we can consider, right? That like if this person elects to end this relationship with the one who's kind of causing them all this like dilemma and harm, will that actually mean that the rest of the people will exclude them? Because that's a obviously another kind of common thing, right? That like people take sides in a breakup.
Yeah.
And then, so there may be truth to this feeling that they would be completely isolated. And so, what do you do with that? I mean, it seems like they said in the beginning of the letter or the context that they give that they've sort of chosen to live here permanently. And so, there would have to be a way to try to think about how to exist in this space that's also your space that doesn't, I don't know, that doesn't allow all these other people to kind of control your sense of yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that seems impossible if everyone kind of backs up this other person in this situation.
Gosh, yeah, that's a whole nother fucking thing. And I really hope that the people in this community, that there is no implicit or explicit pressure to do that.
I mean, the way that this like relationship seems to take up so much space in the writer's head probably translates into them not putting as much effort into these other potential relationships with people. Not because they necessarily don't want to have these other people as close to them, but that like this thing is such a constant dilemma. And like they said, this like ghost is like haunting them all the time, that it just takes up a lot of their emotional space. So that might mean that they haven't cultivated these other relationships as much.
Yeah, my hope is that the person that the writer is referring to doesn't feel, again, right, either intentionally or unintentionally, like they are a gatekeeper to other aspects or connections or resources within this community.
I don't have a lot of faith in that given what they wrote. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, okay, so reading through this, it seems very clear that somewhere the writer knows that this relationship cannot go on, at least the way it is, and
Yeah,
that
they do. They know that.
it's
Mhm.
so harmful. And every time they try to deal with that or work it out with the person, it doesn't end up working because this person is unwilling to kind of let them go, even if when they're saying they need to. So I can imagine that this person that they're having so much trouble with would also try to kind of generalize their power of this person into the community,
Mhm.
which I mean, that just really sucks if that's true.
Yeah,
Um,
there's not, gosh, there's just like, that's so, so hard. That's like, yeah, that's a whole nother layer.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, that's the impossible situation when
Yeah.
and I don't think that this person, given what they said, like, I don't know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. When you said that that would be the impossible situation, you mean if that were the case, that would in fact be the impossible situation, not the individual breakup.
right, like they could go no contact and feel with time like their own growth and strength within that. But if the no contact means that they're excluded from the community at large, that makes the decision even harder, and that makes the experience afterwards like it really undermines the possibility of this person feeling strength if they don't have connection to other people or the main place that they want to be part of because of who they are and how they want to be in the world is now inaccessible to them. Yeah, I mean that does feel impossible when you're like in this place, this is your place too. You live there. You want to live there. And yeah, if you feel on the outs and don't know how long that even might last.
Yeah, I certainly hope that isn't the case. But I get the sense that you and I have a shared sense that it could be, or that there is some aspect of that that is lurking underneath the surface. And because that's not necessarily explicitly within the writer's letter, I don't know if much more can be said on that.
No, I'm just kind of unpacking possibilities. I mean, okay, so like this is something I just recorded this conversation with Dean Spade, who wrote the book Love in a Fucked Up World, and he talks about this, the kind of overlap between in queer relationships and in like organizing spaces. Well, first of all, how we like play out these kind of games of being like wanting everyone to agree with you that you've been harmed by this person, and then that excludes you from the organizing world. One way to try to approach this would be, first of all, like in these spaces, often they're messy because we don't talk about what they are fully, like how they're meeting needs of social connection and like love, and also meeting needs of like wanting to relate to the world from this the kind of liberatory perspective. So I wonder then if it's possible for them to find someone in particular, maybe like a person who could like almost work as a mediator in this
Mhm.
situation. Or yeah, I just wonder to what extent they've shared any of this experience with people who are in the community. Hopefully they feel able and empowered to do so without kind of like, worrying about betraying this other person. But man, I just like keep getting stuck in the possibility of this person who is holding all this power over them, like also tries to wield it in the community.
You could be picking up on a just an intuition from the letter. Yeah, I keep going back to what you said about the foundation of community not necessarily being like personality, but a dedication to mutual care and support. And I hope that there are people that this writer has spoken with about this situation, and that those people are able to not see this as, like sides being drawn, but rather somebody in their community of care and support saying, there's another person in this shared community that I'm going to be kind of disentangling with. Like they're not going to be somebody that I can be in that kind of closeness with. And is there a way for some of that foundational care and support to kind of like rebalance or be distributed that isn't dependent on whether or not two people like each other?
Yeah.
It's so hard. Like it is just really hard to navigate, likability in community.
It recreates the terror of the family too, because it's like a
Mhm.
divorce,
Totally.
and then everyone else has to like figure out their space in it, and like having that kind of dynamic sucks. Like we want to get out of this sort of privatizing of care, individualizing of care that relies on like a single kind of relationship and its longevity.
Yeah.
I did have a more optimistic take though.
What was it?
So in my experiences of like ending relationships that are harming me, at first it's like really hard because like it's almost like an addiction to the kind of back and forth.
Yep.
And you, by taking your space, you're creating that part of it where you go away and want to come back, and you might like keep trying to test it out, like putting out feelers to this person, and then either feeling like, oh, I could go back, or getting like burnt again. But then in my experience, I've often had a moment. It's like this crystallization
Hmm.
where, oh my God, like why have I even, yeah, like why is this person even able to play this role for me? Like
Yeah.
you sort of like it's just a person.
Right.
It's
Like a
so
spell,
they're
it's broken.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It's a spell, and you can see the person for who they are, which is like their own limited being, not someone who has all this power over you, and that can release you. I mean, for me, it's often like cruelly funny to get to that point. I'm like, oh
Oh
my
God,
God.
yeah. I've had that moment so many times. It's like, yeah, it is funny.
There's the section in Proust's In Search of Lost Time called Swan in Love. It's like the second part of the book, which can stand as its own book. But it's like this whole long thing of Swan falling in love with this person, Odette, who's like a courtesan. So she's having all these like, relationships with men. And he becomes so obsessed with her and so jealous of their relationship that he's like following her and all these things and like just constantly harming himself by like loving her. And
Hmm.
then finally at the end, he's like, to think that I've spent all this time chasing after a woman who's not even my type.
Yeah, right,
Of
right.
course they do get married and but like that moment of like realization, like this person's not even like what I actually want,
Yeah.
right?
Oh my God. It's like it feels like a cosmic joke.
Yeah. And you
Yeah,
may feel inside the relationship that you would do anything, even though you can see that it's harmful to maintain this relationship because you feel dependent on it for some sort of sense of yourself. Or, like, and I don't think this is the situation then, but like, oh, the sex is good or something like that. Like,
yeah.
um,
I mean, they said that there was a time when the sex felt really joyful,
yeah.
and that what you're saying takes me back to why I really encourage this person to do some reflection. I mean, I'm sure they have already, but just really explicitly, like what is love and what is activation?
Hmm. Yeah.
What is
And
it? What is a spell and what is actually caring for another person who cares for you?
yeah. And those things can like change, like, going back to this person's transition. If you're having sex with a person in intimacy while you're going through transition and you feel supported and you're like coming into your own body, and this is a place where you can experiment and try things out that like new things that like make you feel good, that's another kind of thing that may be really hard to let go of because you
Yeah.
feel like you might rely on this physical interaction to feel okay.
Right.
But like look back at it or look at what's happening now and see if that's actually continuing to help you feel that like in your body the way you want to. It's possible that it's like it's no longer doing that and in fact creating its own kind of dysphoria or something, right?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
you don't actually feel loved and supported by this person and therefore you may not, the sex has gotten bad, you may not be able to embody yourself the way you want. So that's another place to like kind of see the possibility of release because you are actually no longer supported in this place and that kind of intimacy is really vulnerable.
Vulnerable. Yeah. And it is hard to let go of if you feel like you're having an experience with somebody where an aspect of your person is being reflected back to you in a way that it hasn't before.
Yeah. It's really scary to jump away from something that at one point was supportive and helpful to you and that clouds over the fact that it is no longer that, but you feel like you're going out on your own without this kind of like this tether to the kind of initial moment of grounding. But again, the sort of idea of breaking up is that you don't actually need that to feel okay in yourself. And in fact, perhaps the letting go or the breaking of that tether is what will allow you to take like a new step that would feel even better, possibly for the other person too.
I do hope that generally speaking, when we initiate a breakup, we're giving we're offering a gift, like
Yeah.
whoever we're breaking up with. I just went back and reread the part of the context where the person said that they were angry and the writer said that they were angry about not being able to move forward, and I hope that some of that anger can shift away from being angry at themselves. This is a really understandable experience to me, at least, and there's no need to point that anger at yourself. I think sometimes anger can be a real indicator that our boundaries are being pressed on or being violated or crossed, and I would say that without there being kind of this said explicitly, that the writer has had their boundaries pushed on in the sense that they have been asking for clarity numerous times, and this person has continued to act in very confusing ways.
Yeah, it's very common that, or it's easy, it's much safer feeling to turn the anger on yourself.
Yeah.
I'm sure this person's actually feeling anger towards the other person.
Mhm.
And it's hard and scary to express that, especially because it might precipitate a total break, right? Because like the other person can't handle hearing your anger. And I also know that there's situations, for me where I'm like, it's not even worth it for me to express the anger because I'm not going to be heard, or it's not going to do anything that's productive for me. And so, but that still gives the space for you to turn it in on yourself. So if you can like actually be in this point where you're like, okay, what kind of communication with this other person will actually be helpful and beneficial to kind of any kind of moving forward, and what won't? And then think about where you want to put your energy. But you do have to release yourself from like the self-blame, because you aren't completely responsible for this relationship. All you're responsible for is like, your role in it. And maybe that's just like the fact that you keep going back. But like being angry is not going to help you figure out those boundaries. So if you can let yourself off the hook, that's another way of like moving forward. It's another break, because you're also dealing with your anger towards the other person by letting yourself off the hook.
Yeah, and I think being angry can be helpful, but the anger being presented toward themselves is not. I would argue that could continue to kind of like press them down and make it so that they can't feel ready and willing to take the next step and break up.
And that shame and anger at yourself will also prevent you from feeling safe and okay with other people, because you generalize. You're like, I am not good. I'm bad. I can't like manage these things. Like people don't like me or whatever. You don't want to bring that everywhere you go.
Right.
Not that I'm just like saying this, but it's something that I struggle with a lot. I internalize a lot of negative feelings at myself and beat myself up a lot. And maybe also with the break, maybe they do need time on their own without the kind of dealing with the whole, queer anarchist social hub. Like, sometimes it feels like you should be engaged in all these social activities because that's what, it's like you shouldn't be putting all your time in being alone. Like, you want to be involved, you want to be making a change in the world, like all these things, right? Like it's better to be social. But in this current situation, there may be a need for alone time in order to feel yourself, like, experience yourself and experience your care for yourself and a fullness of yourself that doesn't rely on anyone else to reflect. And then being able to move forward from that to engage with other people. And like, if you have that crystallization moment where you're like, it's so ridiculous that I even let this person have the power over me, then possibly you can go back into the total social situation and relate to this person without being constantly kind of unsettled by the relationship, because you'll be like, this person is just a person and I don't want them anymore because it sucked.
Yeah, it sucked. It sucked. And they get to have the nourishing relationships that they want to be having and that people want to be having with them.
It's likely that this person also plays this game with other people in various ways. And, I don't know, like,
well, I think so too.
Yeah, eventually that's not going to serve them and people will start probably being aware of it. I don't know if that's true, but like it's likely. It's a kind of unhealthiness that this person is bringing into the world that our writer has kind of fallen prey to. And again, I'm not trying to blame the other person. People are traumatized and it's really hard to work through that stuff, but it's probably infecting all of their relationships, and it's like a protection for them to kind of, hold themselves accountable to anything.
I really want to get an update from this writer if they're willing.
Yeah. I hope, first of all, that the process of writing this was sort of revelatory, because when I read it, it seems very clear and that what is important for you to do, which is to move on from this relationship, even though there's like ghosts holding you back. You said you want to put them back in their graves. I think that's totally possible. You're going to have to learn how to like deal with the ways that they come back to haunt you without being enticed to like resurrect them. That's what I always talk about, like living in a haunted house. Like I used to think that anytime a ghost appeared, that meant that there was an action that needed to be taken in response to it. But that's not true. You're just going to have these things come in your life and you're going to have to be like, oh, that was a time, that was a moment. It did this to me, or it was good in these ways. And like often the ghost will like make you think about one side or the other. I hope this person has been able to accommodate the ghosts in a way that doesn't make them feel like wrong or bad. And I also hope that they are able then to put some energy into feeling themselves, and then also into cultivating these relationships with other people who hopefully are there as another space for them to put their love and kindness and care. Well, are we done with this for now?
I don't have anything else to add. I believe that the writer knows what they need.
Yeah.
And they also know how hard it is to know what you need, and that they know how hard it is to know what you need when it's painful, when what you need is painful. I believe that they have what they need and they know what they need.
Right. Trust yourself. And if you continue this for a little while after like hearing our perspective, like also don't be hard on yourself. You have to come to it yourself.
That's right. Yeah. And you get to learn a little more.
Well, thanks for sharing this like really difficult situation with us. Feel free to update us. We're sending all our love and care for you to create a space that supports you.
Yeah, I'm imagining and hoping for really big, juicy, nourishing relationships to come your way.
Well, till next time.
Till next time. Thanks, Julie.
Thank you, Caroline.
You've been listening to The Breakup Theory. Share and follow us wherever you get podcasts. Check out causeshinythings.com for more of my stuff. Till next time, bye.